A message lights up the phone in the middle of the night, a single word from him after hours of silence. Her chest tightens, not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. She waits, watching the dots appear and vanish, her body pulsing with the ache of anticipation. Sleep escapes her. She rereads the last exchange, searching for a sign, a clue, a misstep. By morning, she feels hollow, abandoned, as if she had been holding her breath all night in the presence of a ghost. That ghost is not only him. It is her own shadow reflected back, the silence that enslaves his desire. There is a hidden pattern in this hunger. Silence is not absence, it is domination. His lack of words is not neutral, it cuts into the nervous system like a blade, forcing her into restless submission. Each pause becomes a command. Each delay makes her body remember something older than this man. The little girl who sat by the window, waiting for a parent who never came. The young woman who learned that attention must be earned with perfect obedience. Silence does not merely frustrate her. It awakens an unconscious reaction, a primal fear of being unseen. And yet, beneath the pain, there is a twisted promise. If she endures long enough, his desire will return. But what if his desire is not returning because of her patience, but because of her silence? What if her stillness, her swallowed voice, becomes the very rope binding him tighter? Men do not crave the woman who chases them. They crave the woman who holds her power in mystery, who refuses to reveal all at once. He senses when her silence is submission, and he senses when her silence is sovereignty. One enslaves him, the other enslaves her. The difference is everything. Jung called this the shadow, the hidden, forbidden energy that leaks through the cracks of our conscious masks. When she texts frantically, when she begs for answers, when she tries to soothe the terror of his withdrawal, she is ruled by her shadow's fear. But when she withdraws into her own depth, when she allows him to feel the absence of her warmth without begging for his flame, she channels another archetype, the silent oracle. She is not mute. She is unreadable, like the night sky withholding its stars until dawn. The silent oracle is dangerous, not because she harms, but because she refuses to be consumed. Men project their anima, their ideal feminine image, onto women who surrender too quickly, but onto her they project mystery. His unconscious begins to spin stories about her because silence is never empty, it is filled with projection. The more she withholds her validation, the more he feels the ache of uncertainty. That ache becomes desire. His imagination binds him tighter than any words ever could. This is why silence enslaves his desire, not through manipulation, but through archetypal gravity. The feminine that does not explain herself mirrors to him his own incompleteness. He senses the abyss inside her, and in that abyss, he sees his own shadow reflected. She becomes the cracked mirror he cannot look away from, because within it lies the truth he has never dared to face. Yet here is the danger for her. If her silence comes from fear, she becomes the abandoned child once more, trapped in waiting. If her silence comes from sovereignty, she becomes the untouchable muse, whose worth is not determined by whether he answers or not. The difference is invisible on the surface, but palpable in energy. One drains her, the other feeds her. One chains her, the other frees her. This is why so many women confuse suffering with devotion. They believe enduring silence will prove their love, but in truth it only deepens their invisibility. Love cannot be proven by absence. Desire cannot be grown by waiting. The silent oracle teaches a different law, that what is withheld consciously is more powerful than what is given unconsciously. Her silence is not waiting, it is choosing. The man feels it. He does not know why her absence burns more than her presence. He does not realize that the shadow he projected onto her now stares back, demanding he confront the parts of himself he would rather bury. Her silence becomes his obsession, not because she withholds words, but because she withholds herself from being consumed. She does not beg for his fire, she becomes the fire. And yet the question remains, How can she know the difference inside herself? How does she recognize when her silence is a mask of fear and when it is the voice of her true archetype speaking through the void? The difference begins in the body. Fear-driven silence trembles. It keeps checking the phone, scanning the silence like a radar searching for a lost ship. Sovereign silence feels different, it breathes. It allows the unease to rise, but it does not bow to it. A woman embodying the silent oracle does not wait for him. She waits within herself, letting her own presence answer the ache that once demanded his. This is not easy because the body is wired for patterns. It will scream with the voice of the little girl inside, begging her to break the silence with desperate words. But if she can hold the scream without obeying it, she transforms the silence from prison into throne. Every man senses this shift, even if he has no language for it. When silence is born from fear, he feels burdened, pressured, as if her absence carries a silent accusation. But when silence is rooted in sovereignty, he feels the tension of mystery, the intoxicating pull of something just out of reach. He will circle around it like a moth around flame, unable to grasp why he cannot stop thinking about her. This is the paradox of attraction. What is fully revealed becomes ordinary, but what remains partly veiled becomes unforgettable. Jung's concept of projection explains why this matters. Each man carries an anima image, a psychic imprint of the feminine shaped by childhood, culture, and wounds. He projects this image onto the woman before him, hoping she will confirm his story. When she fills the silence with words and reassurance, she becomes his comfort object, confirming his unconscious fantasy of being mothered. But when she refuses to soothe his projections, he is left unsettled. His anima projection begins to unravel, and in its place emerges desire. Desire not just for her body, but for the mystery she represents. This mystery is not a game. It is not a trick to lure him back. It is the deepest truth of the feminine. The soul cannot be consumed or fully known. The silent oracle embodies this truth by holding her silence like a chalice. She does not withhold to punish. She withholds because her essence cannot be bought with crumbs of attention. In this way, she calls forth not the boy in him who seeks comfort, but the man who must step into the unknown. But here lies the danger of power. Many women, upon tasting the effect of silence, begin to wield it like a weapon. They mistake detachment for sovereignty. They play at being cold, withholding affection not from depth but from fear of losing control. This backfires, for men sense the difference between authentic mystery and defensive distance. The silent oracle is not cold. She is warm, but she is not available on demand. Her silence holds tension, but also depth. It is not the absence of connection, but the presence of soul. Think of the moon. Its light is not its own, yet the night is transformed by it. It does not beg the sun to shine upon it, nor does it chase the darkness away. It simply holds its place, and the world cannot ignore it. This is the quality of the silent oracle's silence. It reflects without chasing, it glows without grasping, and in doing so, it awakens something ancient in him. Awe. Awe is the true root of desire, for no one longs for what they fully control. The test is subtle. When he does not answer, does she feel like she is drowning, or does she feel like she is floating on her own waters? When she restrains herself from explaining, does she burn with resentment, or does she feel the sacred stillness of her own being? The answer reveals whether her silence is shadow or sovereignty. Sovereignty does not seek revenge. It does not cling to the hope of his return. It holds silence as a mirror, allowing him to face his own emptiness. Whether he chooses to step toward her or not becomes irrelevant, because her worth is not on trial. This is the micro-shift she can begin now. The next time silence stretches out between them, instead of filling it, she can enter it. She can let it press on her chest, let it awaken the old ache, but she does not need to move. She becomes still, like a mountain facing the storm. She breathes into the discomfort until it dissolves. In that moment, she becomes untouchable, not because he cannot reach her, but because she no longer needs him to. Yet the cliff remains. If silence is her throne, what happens when he finally returns to break it? Does she open the door and let his presence dictate her worth again? Or does she stand as the oracle, deciding what his return truly means for her? When he returns, it is never with the same face as when he left. His silence has already rewritten the story in his unconscious. He comes back not simply to her, but to the space she created within him by refusing to be consumed. This is why his first words after silence carry such weight. They are confessions, even when disguised as casual remarks. A simple, "Hey," carries the echo of his unrest, the echo of nights spent circling her absence like a predator stalking prey it cannot catch. What he wants is not the word itself, but the reassurance that the oracle has not vanished completely into her own depths. Here the temptation arises. The little girl inside her wants to leap at his return, to break the tension with relief, to rush into the arms of the one who left her starving. But the woman who has become the silent oracle knows this is the moment of choice. The crack. Ked mirror has been placed in his hands. He must look into it or turn away. If she collapses into instant warmth, the mirror shatters and he returns to his comfort. But if she holds her silence for a moment longer, if she lets his words echo without immediate rescue, the mirror remains intact. He must confront what his own silence created. This is the subtle dance of power. Not domination, not manipulation, but the raw truth of projection. His silence enslaves his desire because he cannot escape the story he projected onto her. When she refuses to play the rescuer, he feels the jagged edges of his own shadow cutting through. It forces him to ask questions he avoids. Why does he crave her when she is absent but feel suffocated when she is near? Why does he test her patience, yet dread her disappearance? These are not questions about her. They are questions about him, but she is the one who pulls them from the depths. In mythology, oracles never shouted their prophecies. They whispered them, sometimes in fragments, sometimes in silence itself, and men traveled miles to interpret what could not be fully understood. Her silence functions in the same way. It is not empty. It is charged, symbolic, a test of his ability to sit in the unknown. The man who cannot endure it will accuse her of cruelty. The man who can endure it will discover something rare, a feminine presence that is not afraid to remain untouchable. But here lies the deepest paradox. The silent oracle's silence does not only enslave his desire, it frees hers. Each time she resists the urge to fill the void with desperate words, she reclaims a piece of herself that was scattered in the pursuit of approval. Each withheld text becomes a thread woven back into her own soul. Slowly, she realizes the power was never in whether he responded, but in her ability to stop begging for response. She ceases to be a prisoner of his rhythms and becomes the author of her own. This awakening is unsettling. It cracks the ground beneath old stories of love, devotion, and sacrifice. The woman who thought she needed his attention to feel alive begins to taste a different aliveness, the still, burning center of her own being. This is why silence, when held consciously, becomes sacred. It is not a trick to win him back. It is the crucible in which she meets herself. She becomes the woman who cannot be erased by absence, who cannot be enslaved by his silence, because she has faced the silence within. And yet, even in sovereignty, desire does not vanish. The oracle is not immune to longing. She still feels the pull of connection, the thrill of being chosen. But her longing no longer drives her to collapse. Instead, it becomes a fire she holds, a reminder that desire itself is sacred when not confused with need. Men sense this difference. They are drawn to the woman who desires but does not depend, who longs but does not beg. Her silence whispers that she is complete, and in that completeness, she becomes unforgettable. This leads to the sharper question she must face. When he returns, and the silence has already carved its truth, will she let him step into her sacred space as a man transformed, or will she let him back only to repeat the old pattern? How does she tell whether his return is an unconscious reflex to relieve his discomfort, or a conscious act of devotion to the depth she embodies? The answer hides not in his words, but in his actions. A man returning to relieve his own unease will speak lightly, as if nothing happened, expecting her warmth to wash away the discomfort of his absence. His energy seeks comfort, not connection. But a man who has faced the mirror will carry a different weight. His words may still be simple, but behind them will be presence. He will linger longer, listen deeper, and move toward her rather than expecting her to collapse into him. The difference is felt in the body. It is the calmness of a river that flows toward her, not the restlessness of a tide that comes and goes. The silent oracle knows this distinction because she has learned to sit with her own silence. She has grown attuned to the pulse of authenticity beneath the surface of gestures. Where once she would have grasped at any return, now she waits, watching. Not passively, but actively, as a queen watches those who approach her throne. She does not interrogate him with demands, but her very being becomes the test. If he has only come back to sip from her energy without offering his own, he will falter under her gaze. If he has returned to stand beside her, he will endure. This is the shadow truth. Silence is not absence. Silence is a crucible. It burns away illusion and exposes intent. His desire, enslaved by the void she created, will either be transmuted into genuine devotion or revealed as hollow hunger. And she, in her sovereignty, is no longer afraid of either outcome, for she has learned that her worth is not at stake. The cracked mirror he must face is his, not hers. Many women fear this stage most of all. The fear whispers that if she does not reward his return with immediate warmth, he will vanish again and she will be left alone. But this is the lie of the shadow, the echo of childhood wounds that believed love must be earned through self-abandonment. In truth, if he vanishes when met with her sovereignty, it is not a loss but a revelation. He was never seeking her, only the comfort of his projections. Better that the mirror shatter than she shatter herself trying to keep it intact. This does not mean the silent oracle becomes closed or cold. She is not ice. She is fire contained, mystery alive. When she chooses to speak after silence, her words carry weight because they are not scattered in desperation. They emerge like prophecy, each syllable deliberate. This is why he leans in, why he listens more closely, why her voice echoes long after the conversation ends. For he knows she could have remained silent, and so every word becomes a gift. There is empowerment in this subtle shift. She no longer asks, "Will he return?" Instead, she asks, "Do I want him to stand in this silence with me?" The question turns the mirror inward. His return is not the prize, her sovereignty is. If he cannot rise to meet it, she has lost nothing, for she already stands whole. If he does rise, it is not because she begged, but because her silence called forth his deeper self. Either way, she remains untouched by the old chains of need. And yet a new tension arises here, more delicate than before. For if silence can enslave his desire, it can also tempt her into power games. The risk is subtle. She may begin to withhold not from sovereignty but from vanity, reveling in the control it gives her. But power without soul becomes poison. To play silence as a trick is to descend into shadow once more, and eventually the mask will crack. True silence is not strategy, it is essence. It is the willingness to let him confront his own darkness while she tends to her own light. This is why her silence, when authentic, becomes irresistible. It is not a void but a vessel. It invites him to pour himself into it, not to consume her, but to meet her at depth. He may resist at first, may recoil from the mirror of his own shadow, but the memory of her silence lingers. It follows him in crowded rooms, in restless nights, in the emptiness of fleeting pleasures. For he knows he has met something he cannot control. And here the question grows sharper, pressing at the edge of her sovereignty. When she recognizes the immense pull her silence has upon him, will she use it to awaken him, or will she use it to bind him? The choice is the hinge upon which her power turns. To use silence to bind him is to become jailer of a man who was never fully present to begin with. His desire may remain, but it will be restless, chained by fear rather than pulled by awe. He will stay not out of devotion, but out of obsession. An obsession without reverence eventually curdles into resentment. The silent oracle who mistakes control for connection will find herself surrounded not by lovers but by prisoners, each one silently plotting escape. But when she chooses to use silence to awaken him, everything shifts. Silence ceases to be a weapon and becomes a mirror. It does not tell him what to do, it shows him what is already within him. It forces him to confront the hollow patterns he repeats, the shallow games that no longer satisfy, the boyhood habits that kept him from becoming a man. Her silence becomes his initiation. Some will fail this test, turning away from the discomfort, fleeing toward women who soothe rather than challenge. But those who remain discover something rare, a woman who does not need them and therefore can truly choose them. This is the paradox of desire. When he senses she does not cling, he feels the pull of her gravity more intensely. When he realizes she will not explain herself into exhaustion, he leans in to listen with more care. When he sees she does not chase, he must decide whether to step forward or vanish. In this way, her silence does not bind him against his will. It calls him to step into his own. And if he cannot, she loses nothing, for she is already whole. Jung wrote that the shadow is not to be destroyed but integrated. Her silence forces him to see his shadow, the part that craves attention without offering presence, the boy who withdraws to test her worth. If he dares to face it, his desire matures. It ceases to be the hunger of a boy and becomes the devotion of a man. This transformation cannot be forced by words, only awakened by the tension of mystery. Silence, when sovereign, becomes the crucible in which he either burns away immaturity or runs from the fire. And what of her? The oracle's silence is not passive waiting, it is an act of radical self-possession. Each time she resists the urge to chase, she retrieves another fragment of herself from the shadows. She learns tha. Her value is not tied to his response, that her voice need not fill every void. In stillness, she rediscovers the ancient truth. She is not half of a whole, she is the whole itself. From this center, she can speak or remain silent, love or walk away, not as reaction but as choice. The cracked mirror returns here, shimmering with its prophecy. From the first moment, it appeared as a symbol of the truth withheld, a truth he could not bear to see. Now it reveals its full meaning. It was never her job to mend the fracture. The crack belongs to him. She is only the reflection, the one who holds it steady long enough for him to recognize his own face. If he dares to look, he may shatter, but in shattering, he may finally awaken. This is why men remember the woman who embodied the silent oracle long after they part ways. It is not her body alone they crave, nor even her beauty. It is the unsettling silence that forced them to glimpse their shadow. She becomes the haunting, the memory that refuses to die because she is not replaceable by comfort or distraction. She is the one who did not collapse. She is the one who remained whole. And yet this realization leads to the final test for her. Will she anchor in this sovereignty without arrogance, without the temptation to prove superiority? Will she allow her silence to remain sacred, a mirror for truth, rather than a stage for control? For even the oracle can fall to shadow if she mistakes her power for her worth. Her worth was always there, silent, eternal, even before he entered her story. So the question becomes one she must carry into the next moment, into the next silence, into the next return. When the world trembles before your stillness, will you use that power to keep him bound, or will you use it to set both of you free? Freedom begins when silence is no longer a performance but a way of being. It is the shift from using absence as leverage to embodying presence within absence. When she rests in this state, her energy changes. She is no longer the woman who checks the door every 5 minutes, waiting for footsteps. She becomes the woman who lights her own lamp in the dark, who reads her own reflection in the still water, who does not measure her value by echoes from another's lips. Men feel this difference instantly. They may not name it, but they cannot escape its effect. It is the difference between a house built on sand and a temple rooted in stone. In this state, her silence ceases to be reactive. It becomes creative. It creates space for truth to surface, both in him and in her. It gives her time to ask herself questions she once avoided. Why did she long for his validation in the first place? What ancient hunger in her kept her waiting by the window of his absence? And what does she truly desire, not from him but from herself? These questions sting, but they are the doorway to sovereignty. For sovereignty is not merely the ability to walk away. It is the ability to stand still without crumbling. A man who encounters such silence either rises or retreats. Rising means he confronts the shadow that kept him playing games of withdrawal and pursuit. Retreating means he clings to the comfort of women who still mirror his unfinished boyhood. Either path reveals the truth, and truth is the oracle's only allegiance. She does not bargain with it. She does not soften it to soothe him. She holds it like a mirror, steady and unflinching. This is why silence enslaves his desire. It does not bend to his terms. It forces him to confront the abyss inside himself, the part that seeks her endlessly because he cannot find himself. Desire without sovereignty becomes addiction. But when her silence refuses to feed that addiction, it turns his craving inward, making him face the hunger he has tried to ignore. Some will flee from this confrontation, but others will return, transformed, bearing not just desire but reverence. For her, the transformation is subtler but no less profound. Each time she sits within her silence, she becomes more fluent in its language. She begins to sense when the silence is shadow, tight, anxious, trembling, and when it is sovereignty, spacious, calm, radiant. She learns to choose the latter, not by suppressing her fear but by breathing through it until it dissolves. In this way, silence becomes her initiation too. It teaches her to differentiate between the child, who waited at the window, and the woman who waits within herself. The cracked mirror now gleams with its resolution. From the first act, it stood as a symbol of fracture, the truth reflected but never whole. Now she sees that the crack was not a flaw but a doorway. Through it, both of them could glimpse what lay hidden: his shadow, her longing, the unfinished patterns binding them both. The mirror did not need mending, it needed to be faced. And in facing it, she discovered her reflection was never broken. The culmination of this journey is not in whether he stays or leaves, whether he answers or remains silent. The culmination is in her sovereignty, the realization that her worth exists independently of his response. This realization frees her. She can love without chains. She can desire without losing herself. She can choose rather than chase. Her silence no longer enslaves her, it empowers her. And in that empowerment, she awakens something deeper than desire: awe. Awe is what lingers. Awe is what keeps him restless in her absence, searching for her in other faces but never finding her essence. Awe is what compels him to step into his own depths if he dares. Awe is what makes the silent oracle unforgettable, because she is not merely a woman, she is an archetype embodied. She is the reminder that true feminine power does not shout, does not beg, does not collapse. It simply is unyielding, magnetic, eternal. And so the final invitation is not for him but for her, to ask herself in every moment of silence, Will she betray her worth for the comfort of temporary words, or will she hold the stillness that reveals her eternal value? Her life will answer. Her choices will answer. And her sovereignty will echo beyond his desire, beyond his shadow, into the world she creates from within. Leave a comment below about the moment you realized your worth doesn't depend on anyone else. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.